This is a documented account from Thomas Hurley, a 24-year-old drive-thru worker at a Burger King location, regarding an escalating stalking incident that began approximately 5 weeks ago and remains unresolved. The suspect has demonstrated knowledge of Hurley's full legal name and home address despite never being visually identified, and police have been unable to locate the individual responsible. Working the late shift at Burger King for about 2 years had never been a problem for Hurley. His shift ran from 10 at night until 4 in the morning, and he considered himself naturally suited to overnight work. The location was typically understaffed after midnight, which meant Hurley often ran the drive-thru window alone during the hours when this pattern began. The first occurrence happened approximately 5 weeks ago during his standard shift. A vehicle approached the drive-thru speaker somewhere between 1 and 3 in the morning, the exact time unrecorded. The voice that came through was male, and according to Hurley, completely unremarkable in tone and quality. The customer ordered a large double Whopper with cheese meal and a Coke, and everything about the transaction appeared routine. When the vehicle arrived at the payment window, Hurley noted the first unusual detail. The driver lowered his window just enough to slide a credit card through the opening, maybe 2 or 3 inches at most, and the vehicle had tinted windows that made it impossible to see the driver's face or any identifying features. The customer completed the payment transaction. Hurley handed back the receipt through the narrow opening, and then something strange happened. The vehicle simply drove forward past the second window without stopping to collect the food. Hurley waited there, holding a bag containing a large double Whopper meal and a Coke for several minutes, expecting the customer to realize the mistake and return, but the customer never came back. He eventually set the bag aside, and later that shift consumed the food himself rather than waste it. People exhibit strange behavior sometimes, especially during late-night hours, so Hurley dismissed the incident as an isolated oddity with no reason to think about it beyond that night. Approximately 7 days later, the same thing happened. A customer ordered a large double Whopper with cheese meal and a Coke, paid at the first window with minimal window opening and tinted glass blocking any view inside, then drove off without collecting the food. Hurley found it strange that someone would repeat the exact same mistake, but he still hadn't connected this to the previous week's incident as being the same individual, assuming instead it was a coincidence. The third occurrence made the pattern impossible to ignore. Same order, same payment method, same abandonment of food, and he began to suspect this was the same person returning repeatedly. By this point, Hurley had accepted the situation as bizarre but ultimately beneficial to him since each transaction resulted in a paid meal he got to eat, so he stopped questioning it. The pattern continued. Every 4 to 5 days, the same vehicle would appear during the same late-night window between 1 and 3 in the morning. The same male voice would order the same meal, the same credit card payment would go through, and the same food would be abandoned. This went on for what Hurley describes as a few more weeks, meaning the pattern repeated somewhere between 4 and 6 additional times. Hurley admits he began to almost look forward to these visits in a strange way, knowing when several days had passed, and thinking to himself that his mysterious benefactor might show up again that night. The whole thing made the monotony of solo night shifts slightly more interesting, and he never felt threatened during this phase. Then came the night everything changed. Hurley was working the speaker position around 2 in the morning when he heard the familiar voice come through requesting the usual order, and he prepared himself mentally to receive another free meal. But this time, after placing the order, the customer said something else that Hurley states he will never forget. "I hope you've been enjoying those Whoppers, Mr. Hurley." His last name is Hurley. His name tag displays only his first name, Thomas, and his surname is not posted anywhere visible to customers. There's no publicly accessible roster or employee board that would reveal his last name, which meant there was no legitimate reason for this person to know his surname. Hurley stood frozen at the speaker for several seconds, unable to process what he'd just heard. When his brain finally caught up to the situation, he began demanding answers through the speaker system, asking who this was, what they wanted, how they knew his name, repeating, "Who is this?" 4 or 5 times according to his own count, with his voice getting more insistent each time. The customer never answered any of the questions. This time, he didn't even pull forward to the payment window. Hurley heard the engine rev, and then the vehicle was gone. Hurley remained rattled for the remainder of his shift, unable to shake the feeling that something was very wrong, that the previous weeks of strange but harmless behavior had been building towards something else. He had no idea what that something was, but he knew with certainty that this wasn't over. When Hurley arrived home after his shift ended at 4 in the morning, he found a handwritten note on his doorstep containing 2 sentences. "I know what you did. You have 3 days." Hurley describes his physical reaction to reading those words. His hands started shaking and he felt sick to his stomach, like someone had punched him in the gut, standing on his doorstep holding that piece of paper and trying to understand what he had supposedly done that would warrant this kind of attention. He has no explanation. Hurley describes his life as unremarkable, almost boring, stating he's 24 years old, works at a Burger King, plays video games on his days off, and doesn't have enemies or secrets. There's nothing in his background that would explain why someone would target him this way, or what the note could be referring to. Hurley didn't sleep that night. He sat on his couch with all the lights on in his apartment, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. The 3-day deadline mentioned in the note loomed over him with no way to prepare for it or understand what it meant. He went to work the next night because he had no choice, needing the income and unable to simply not show up. The anxiety stayed with him through his entire shift, but the mysterious customer didn't appear that night. The following night, the customer returned. This time, there was no pretense of ordering food. The voice came through the drive-thru speaker and immediately told Hurley to write something down. And before Hurley could respond or refuse, the customer provided an address somewhere on the outskirts of town in an area Hurley didn't recognize. Then the customer delivered his actual demand, $10,000, and Hurley had 2 days to deliver it to that address. Hurley's first instinct was to laugh because the demand seemed absurd. He didn't have $10,000 then, and doesn't have $10,000 now, working a night shift at a fast food restaurant with no realistic way to produce that amount of money in 2 days. But the customer wasn't joking. As soon as the demand was delivered, the vehicle drove away, leaving Hurley standing there processing what had just been asked of him. The absurdity of the amount didn't make it less terrifying, and if anything, it made the whole situation feel more unstable, more dangerous, because it meant this person had no realistic understanding of Hurley's financial situation or didn't care. Hurley made the decision to ignore the demand, convincing himself it had to be some kind of elaborate scam or possibly a prank from someone he knew, though he couldn't think of anyone who would do something like this. He acknowledges now that he should have called the police immediately at this point, but the thought didn't even occur to him in the moment. 3 nights passed. Hurley began to think maybe it was over, that whoever was behind this had moved on, or realized they'd targeted the wrong person. He was wrong. Hurley was at home after his shift, sitting on his couch watching television and trying to decompress from the night's work, when without warning he heard the sound of shattering glass. His immediate thought was that someone was shooting at him, so he dropped to the floor on instinct with his heart pounding, waiting for more shots that never came. When he finally got up and looked around his apartment, he realized someone had thrown a rock through his window. The glass was scattered across his floor, and the rock sat in the middle of the debris, and by the time he went to look outside, whoever had thrown it was already gone, with no one visible in any direction. This time, Hurley called the police. He told them everything from the beginning: the pattern of abandoned food orders, the use of his last name, the note on his doorstep, the extortion demand, and now the broken window, providing them with the address he'd been given for the money drop. The police told him they would investigate and advised him to stay vigilant. The police response was minimal. They said they would increase patrols in Hurley's area and told him that without doorbell camera footage, which Hurley doesn't have, there wasn't much they could do to identify who was responsible. They took the report and left. That incident occurred 3 days before Hurley documented this account. In those 3 days, he called in sick to work for 3 consecutive shifts, afraid to go back, but also recognizing that avoiding work doesn't solve the problem, since this person clearly knows where he lives. Hurley acknowledges he's trapped. He can't afford to quit his job and can't afford to move to a different location, stuck in his apartment and stuck at his workplace, both of which have been compromised by someone who has demonstrated they know his full name, his home address, and his work schedule. He mentions one potential avenue for the police investigation. The credit card used to pay for all those early Whopper meals should have a traceable number attached to it, with those transactions going through the system and sitting in the Burger King's records. If the police can track that credit card number, they might be able to identify who's been doing this. But as of this recording, the police have not located the suspect. The person who has been following this pattern for 5 weeks, who knows Hurley's personal information, who has made threats and damaged his property, remains unidentified and at large. Hurley has no idea why he was targeted, no idea what he supposedly did to provoke this, and no idea if this person will escalate further or if the broken window was the end of it. The case remains open and unresolved.